Julian, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Erin.
Really strong words. How tough is life at the moment for the Jewish people in Australia, particularly off the back of contributions like that from the Greens?
Well, Australia is a wonderful country, and it's a country that's been particularly wonderful to Jewish Australians. This is one of the few countries on earth that has never had any formal discrimination against Jewish Australians, and so their contribution to every aspect of public life has been extraordinary. The worst thing about what Jenny Leong did this week, in part, was the tentacles, because she was playing on Nazi-era tropes. But even worse than that was trying to deny the right of Jewish Australians, any Australian, to participate in any aspect of the life of this country. I think we've seen a new low in our politics. I cannot believe she can continue as the Green spokesperson for anti-racism and multiculturalism in this state.
It was appalling, absolutely appalling, as has been a lot of the other anti-Semitism that we've seen. You believe that we needed to come out strongly right at the start, right off the back of the Opera House. Whatever was chanted, it was horrific what occurred there. Have we missed our chance?
The standard you walk by is the standard you accept, Erin, and I think right from the start of the vile terrorist attacks on the 7th of October, people have been allowed to get away with all sorts of conduct which I just regard as unacceptable. I'd be saying the same whether we were talking about Jews or whether we were talking about Palestinians or anyone in Australia. This is a great country, it's a free country, but it's a country where people, law-abiding people, should be free to be themselves, to worship the God that they believe in, and to feel a sense of safety. And I think that has been ripped out from under the Jewish community by the lack of action, federal, state and local, by the lack of any action from any of these diversity and inclusion organisations whose job it is to be stamping out racism and bigotry, and yet this has been allowed to fester in our community.
And the raging feminists, don't forget them, incredibly silent when it comes to attacks on Jewish women.
Indeed.
Absolutely. I want to talk to you. You last year famously quit Shadow Cabinet because of your support for The Voice, the Indigenous voice to Parliament. You have been passionate for decades about helping to improve the plight of Indigenous Australians. So to watch the Aboriginal flag being used in the way in which it is at the moment at anti-Israel protests, not pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, almost pro-Hamas in some cases. How does that make you feel?
There's a very long history of Jewish Australians, going back to people like Jim Spiegelman and the Freedom Rides, to the lawyers for Eddie Mabo, to people like Mark Liebler and myself, walking side by side with Indigenous Australians. I think the co-option of Indigenous issues by Palestinian groups, none of whom were out and about campaigning for Indigenous people, say during the Voice referendum, has been a great tragedy. And I stand with great heroes and friends of mine like Nova Peris, like Warren Mundine, like Sean Gordon and Marcia Langton, who've called this out for what it is. The issues going on in Israel and Gaza have nothing to do with Indigenous issues here, and indeed the deep friendship and respect of Indigenous people and Jewish people goes back decades in this country. So I'm quite upset by it all.
I can imagine. You visited somewhere with Nova Peris-Nebo a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I took Nova to the Jewish Museum because I was so impressed with some of the things that she's been saying, and I said to her, she reached out to me for a catch-up, and I said, well, why don't you come to the Jewish Museum? I'd like to show it to you. And it was very impactful for her, seeing some of the stories of the Holocaust, and in particular we came to a display that was there where a business in Nazi Germany had basically said, well, you're a Jew, we're not going to employ you anymore. And one of the museum guides picked up their phone and showed us hot off the press that terrible story in South Africa of the under-19s cricket captain basically being dismissed because they're Jewish. And Nova said, I can't believe this is happening in this day and age. She's a hero of mine, not just as a sports person, but for her moral courage. And we need to see more Australians of moral courage standing for other Australians.
Absolutely. Would you take me to that museum?
I'd love to.
I've never been. I would love you to take me one day over the next couple of weeks.
It'd be a privilege.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming in and making time for us. And I'm so sorry for what you're going through in your family and your community at the moment.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.